We're alone until we're not. Chapter 1. Orbital Station 2301. The words glowed across the wide classroom display, shifting languages every few seconds. English, Mandarin, Hindi, Arabic. The children's educaps translated them seamlessly, humming the phrase directly into their thoughts. We're alone until we're not. The teacher stood proudly at the front, a guest beside her. Children, today we have a very special visitor. Please welcome the Director of Solar Affairs. The director inclined her head, slate tucked neatly beneath her arm. Her regulation-length dark hair framed a pale, composed face as she surveyed the room of young faces. The children stared back, educaps blinking softly, their curiosity almost tangible. She smiled faintly. Funny how every classroom, even in orbit, still carried that same faint scent of metal, plastic, and childhood. A boy raised his hand immediately. "Did you really come here in Envoy 1? The director allowed herself a small smile. "Yes, she's very fast. We can reach the moon in a few hours, Mars in less than a day. Faster than anything humanity has built before. And Bishop keeps me company between flights." A ripple of quiet laughter passed through the room. Another child leaned forward. "Where will our fleet go when they're finished?" Her voice softened. "Outward. To explore. To remind the universe that humanity still dreams. One day, when we are ready, we may go farther still, to seek those who sent us the great welcome 3 centuries ago." The director paused, realizing how long it had been since she'd spoken to children, how easily their wonder stripped the cynicism from her voice. From the back row, a girl frowned. "Why do we have to live here in orbit and not on Earth?" The director's expression warmed. "Because Earth is heavy," she said gently. "These stations are lighter, bridges to the rest of our colonies on the Moon, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Every one of them needs people like your parents to keep the dream alive." The teacher glanced toward the chrono, clearing her throat softly. The director closed her slate, preparing to leave, when one last hand lifted hesitantly. "Yes?" she asked. "Director?" the boy said, glancing at the glowing display. "What happens if someone else comes?" The director followed his gaze to the words behind her. "We're alone until we're not." Her smile deepened, half wistful, half certain. "Then we'll welcome them with open arms," she said quietly, "just as they once welcomed us." The children fell silent, educaps dimming as the words sank in. The teacher began to thank her, but the director was already at the door, slate under her arm, her thoughts already racing toward the next meeting, and the world waiting beyond the viewport. Chapter 2. Envoy 1. The docking bay swallowed her shuttle in silence, broken only by the soft whine of magnetic clamps. Inside, Envoy 1 gleamed like a knife blade, every panel pristine, every system humming in readiness. To the Titan workers it was a racer. To the lunar artists, a canvas. To her, it was an obligation, another tool to keep her impossible schedule alive. As she stepped aboard, lights rippled down the corridor in welcome. A voice, crisp and calm, filled the air. "Director, you are late." She sighed, dropping her case beside the entry rail. "Bishop, remind me again when I'm ever on time." A pause, dry as a vacuum. "Statistically, never." She smirked despite herself. "Then let's not make history today." Her fingers brushed the command rail as she headed toward the bridge. Envoy 1 had once been her home away from Earth, but she hadn't stepped aboard in more than 2 years. The drive spooled with a low, rising hum, a sound that always reminded her of breath before speech. Through the viewport, Earth shrank into blue brilliance. the orbital station slipping to shadow as it spun to keep gravity steady for everyone below. The solar project's heart was scattered across a dozen worlds, and she would see them all before week's end. To many, the director embodied humanity's hope, its fragile future pried loose from a dying Earth. The cabin thrummed as Envoy 1's drive engaged, pressing her gently into the seat with 0.8 G. Earth and Moon dwindled in the viewport, pale and indifferent. "Course locked," Bishop reported in his dry voice. "ETA to Lunar Yard, 3 hours, 12 minutes. She exhaled and opened her slate. Geneva's demands filled the queue. Invoices for asteroid haulers, oxygen credit disputes from Titan, material tallies from Mars. The responsibilities never ended, nor did the expectations. She brushed her cheek absently, an old habit when stress began to mount. "Punch it, Bishop," she said. "Already punching," the AI replied. The hull vibrated as acceleration deepened. She felt the faint shudder pass through the deck plates like a held breath finally exhaled, and the stars began to slide. Chapter 3. The Moon Yard. Envoy 1 descended toward the lunar surface, its drives whispering as Bishop guided her into the sculpting yards. From orbit, the facility was nothing but a scar of light across the gray plain, a patchwork of domes and gantries strung together by decades of hasty expansion. Up close it looked worse, panels scorched by micrometeorite strikes, walkways pitted, domes patched with mismatched alloys. The yard dome rang with the hiss of 30-megawatt lasers carving beams from raw asteroid iron. Sparks rained like fireflies, drifting down to the deck where workers welded with weary precision. Drone haulers floated in the hangars beyond, still warm from drag burns that had lowered their cargo from near-Earth orbit. Each ton had cost 6,000 credits to haul from the belt. A duty officer in full armor greeted her at the ramp, rifle slung like ceremony. The sight of him, visor down, shoulders squared, was enough to sour her mood. "I'm looking for Dr. M from the Lunar Materials." "Don't call it that," a voice cut in over the comm, rich with impatience. "This is the yard. Capital Y, and I am the sculptor-in-chief, not some administrator's engineer." The director smiled faintly. She'd been warned about him. The yard was officially designated the Lunar Materials Processing and Vessel Fabrication Complex, a name no one here used. Its overseer had long since discarded his bureaucratic title for one of his own invention. The docking umbilical clamped into place, and the director stepped onto the worn floor of the yard's central dome. The air smelled faintly of ozone and welding smoke. Massive beams of raw asteroid iron lay stacked like bones awaiting flesh. Above them, laser arrays traced arcs of light across skeletal hulls, carving the future into being. The sculptor-in-chief stood beside his apprentice, guiding her trembling hands on a cutter. "Not like that. You don't cut, you reveal. The stone already knows what it wants to be." The girl flushed. "Yes, sculptor." From the observation platform, the director folded her arms. "You're not freeing saints. You're making hulls. Deadlines matter more than prayers." The sculptor's laugh boomed through the dome. "Director, these are cathedrals. They will sail longer than pyramids ever stood. They are monuments. They must inspire." Her fingers brushed her cheek, the reflex she never noticed until it hurt. Steel impresses no one. Survival does. And survival means quotas met and ships launched. The sculptor gestured grandly at the glowing beams. "And if they are soulless? If they are mere coffins of alloy, stamped and rushed? No, they must sing. They must remind us who we are. Otherwise, why build them at all?" "Because the UN pays for them," she said evenly. "Because budgets don't bend for poetry. Titan is threatening strikes. Mars is screaming for materials. And Geneva wants a report on every credit spent. I don't have the luxury of cathedrals. I need vessels that work." The apprentice faltered. The sculptor steadied her. "Each cut is a promise, child, a vessel that will outlive you." The director's eyes softened, but only for a moment. "And if we don't deliver, there may be no one left to outlive." On the far wall, painted in bold strokes across lunar stone, the motto glowed faintly in dust. "We're alone until we're not." "Here," It was purpose. Travel interlude. Moon to Mars. Aboard Envoy 1. The hum of Envoy 1's drive settled into its steady rhythm again, pressing her lightly into the seat. Lunar dust still clung to the soles of her white boots, a faint reminder of the yard's grit. Ahead, Mars waited. "Set course for the Mars Research Center," she murmured. "Already done," Bishop replied. "ETA, 9 hours." 9 hours. She exhaled. Time enough for a dozen reports and twice as many messages. Time enough for history to creep back in. "Bishop," she said, "remind me, when did the first dome go up on Mars?" "Official records mark 2084, the AI answered. Privately funded by the Helios conglomerate, it collapsed within 3 years. The current domes were established in 2149 under joint UN and corporate sponsorship. They have been expanded 12 times since. And now, the director muttered, they're our most expensive line item. "Correction," Bishop said dryly. "They are your most expensive line item. Geneva only sees the quarterly reports." She smiled faintly. The AI had a talent for cutting closer to the truth than most humans dared. The viewport showed only stars, endless and indifferent. She thought of the yard's painted motto, the prayer in white strokes on lunar stone. On Mars, it would be something else. It was always something else. A soft ping interrupted. The teacher's tired face filled the screen. "Director, thank you for speaking with the children. These stations can feel thin. They need to see someone who believes. One boy asked if the ships will be finished before he's grown. I told him, yes, I hope I was right." The message ended. "Save that," the director whispered. "Filed," Bishop replied. Geneva's red banner pulsed again. AI rights report overdue. "Bishop, when did the first AI miners enter service?" 2121. Catastrophic failure within 17 hours. Current generation 87% survival rate after 180 years of continuous operation. They now account for 82% of all extractions. She tapped notes, jaw tightening. Machines that outlasted men and still treated as tools. A harsher chime intruded. The UN Strategic Defense Seal flared. From General Marcus Hale. Subject: Course review. Director: After Mars R&D, meet me in the caves. Titan can wait. Strategic prerogatives supersede civilian schedules. We're alone, until we're not. Her cheek twitched under her hand. Hale always turned the motto into a threat. "Bishop, log the detour." "Done. Estimated impact on Titan. Significant." She allowed herself a bitter smile, watching the message fade to black. That's practically early. Chapter 4. Mars, R&D Domes. Envoy 1 settled into the docking cradle above the Martian plain, the red horizon stretching endless and barren. The domes gleamed like pearls against the dust, too clean, too white. Inside, silence reigned. Floors reflected like glass. Technicians moved in ordered lines, educaps glowing faintly beneath the lights. Dr. Kaito waited by the airlock, lab coat immaculate, a steaming mug in hand. He set it down absently on a console, already forgetting it. "Director, welcome to the Frontier Materials Lab. I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to leave your boots outside with that moon dust. This is a clean room." They stepped into a vast chamber. Lunar beams stood in racks under stress lasers, faint fractures crawling across their surfaces. Beside them, slabs of iridescent alloy shimmered, bending light into impossible colors. "The lunar iron will disintegrate in sunlight," Kaito said crisply. "Radiation fractures the lattice. These," he slapped the slabs with reverence, "are 10 times stronger than titanium. They flex without breaking. We've measured resilience under 1.2 mega-electron volts proton flux. They will endure." He tapped a second display. "Preliminary isotopic ratios on the Etherian don't match solar formation models. Best fit synthesis is post-supernova, the kind you'd expect from a compact companion event." "You mean Nemesis," she said. "I mean data," he replied, "but yes, the models point there." Her slate flashed red. "And the hauling costs keep climbing." You promised gravity tractors, a solar rail. Where are they? Kaido poured another mug of coffee, forgetting the first. The tractors drift catastrophically at Lagrange points. The rail loses 12% thrust coherence past 0.4 astronomical units. Prototypes fail. Science does not bow to ledgers, Director. Her fingers brushed her cheek. The reflex again. Budgets build ships, Doctor. Without them, your alloys are shiny museum pieces. He shot back. Without my alloys, your ships are coffins waiting to crack in sunlight. The stress lasers hummed, filling the silence between them. She exhaled slowly, searching for a solution she knew didn't exist. Then tell me something good, Kaido. Just once. He smiled thinly and tapped a console. A waveform scrolled across the screen, jagged, deliberate, repeating. This isn't noise, he said, voice low with awe. It rides with the fragments. Pulse gaps at 2, 3, 5, 7 seconds. Primes, patterned, intentional, perhaps a probe, perhaps more. Her ear chimed. Hale's seal, pulsing urgent. She was late again. Director, do you understand? If it's deliberate, then it's a distraction I don't have time for. She snapped her slate shut. The general wants your alloys. I have to go argue with him in the caves. She strode out. 6 mugs of coffee lined the corridor, still steaming faintly where Kaito had left them. Behind her, the waveform continued to scroll, steady and ignored. We're alone. Until we're not, glowed faintly on the bulkhead. Here, it was warning. Chapter 5. The Caves. The director hated the idea of going to the caves. The last thing she wanted was to be in the heart of the military's fleet. The elevator sank through Mars like a swallowed bead. The walls were glass at first, showing a clean cross-section of red regolith and the faint glimmer of ice. Then black basalt closed in, and the lights dimmed to a narrow spine. Somewhere above, the immaculate domes gleamed like pearls. Down here, the planet remembered it was a furnace once. Local comms degrade beyond level 6, Bishop said in her ear, voice pitched low. Acoustic baffling and magnetic shielding. Someone here dislikes echoes. Log the dislike, the director murmured. The car sighed to a stop. A hatch unfolded on its own incline, breathing out air that smelled faintly of iron and ozone. The floor underfoot was not perfectly level. Old lava flow caught and frozen, skinned over with alloy decking. Along the ceiling, acoustic tiles drank sound. Even her footsteps seemed embarrassed to exist. 2 soldiers waited, visors up, expressions neutral. Director, one said, General Hale will see you now. The corridor bent and bent again until even the elevator felt like a rumor. They passed doors without labels. One was ajar just enough to show a shape under tarps, brutish and skeletal, strings of sensors braided like veins across its frame. The director didn't slow. She pressed the edge of her slate into her palm until it bit. Hale's operations room was carved out of the tube's belly, low, wide, and dark. The only light came from a projection table in the center, an old star's worth of data pinned and spinning. The general didn't stand when she entered. He never did. Director, he said, eyes still on the projection. You're late. I was defending your budget, she said, walking to the table. Statistically pointless, Bishop would say, but I try. Hale looked up. His face was a clean map of old injuries, one eye filmed, the other very clear. Sit. She didn't. You asked for me? Ask. He twitched a finger, and the projection obeyed, zooming to a crooked band slicing across the inner belt. The Hermes Corridor, he said, your favorite hunting ground. It's where the survey density is best and the Delta V to Luna is tolerable, she said, and where Kaido's elements seem to hide. You know this, Marcus. What do you want? We're changing how we choose, Hale said, effective immediately. Choosing what? She asked, even though she knew. It was better to make him say it. Which rocks get tugged, he said, patient. Which we let drift. Which we break apart. Up to now, your office had first refusal after the orbital arrays tagged a candidate. That ends today. We need them for our armament. The projection flickered like a nervous star. Icons studded the corridor, some green, some red, some a pale, ambiguous yellow. He splayed his fingers and the legend unfurled. Density between 4 and 5 grams per cubic centimeter. Trace iridium and osmium above procurement threshold. Exotic isotope ratios, the ones your Dr. Kaito drools over. Hale didn't smile when he said it. These are now defense priority assets. They come to me. She felt the old heat rise. Anger or shame, she could never tell them apart anymore. You're classifying civilian hull stock as armament, she said. You're strip mining my skeletons to plate your toys. Hulls can wait, he said. Shields can't. Kaito's alloys are not shields, she said. They're endurance. The lunar iron will disintegrate in sunlight without them. We're not stamping helmets. We're building lives. You are building targets, Hale said. She pulled the slate from her arm and flicked reports into the air. Tonnage, costs, schedules, all the little rivers of duty she swam every day. The Hermes Survey Network tags candidates. My team reviews shape, mass, spin rate. We pick forms we can actually work with. Your orbital arrays care about numbers. The yard cares about what can be revealed. She held his gaze. You don't just hit something with 30-megawatt cutters because the spreadsheet says it's pretty. He leaned across the table, hands braced, voice low. And you don't let sculptors decide strategy. The director took a breath, felt her cheek under her own hand, the automatic touch, then let it fall. Dr. Kaito is the reason any of this endures. He didn't lobby for this. He doesn't know where your line is because he doesn't live in your world. He lives at a scale that outlasts us. You want to conscript him for something he did not make. He made a tool, Hale said. Tools get used. He made a cathedral stone, she said, and you want to pave roads with it. Roads get people home, he said. He stabbed 2 points in the projection. G43, G57. Your miners shipped loads from both last week, then we lost them. Lost? The word stuck. Offsets went dark, then the beacons, then the life monitors. Hale flicked his hand again. The projection table went black. A new feed stuttered and steadied. Grainy, low light. A camera wedged in a cargo bay. Dust glittered at the threshold. Something moved beyond the light. Not shape exactly, rather a refusal of shape, as if the air had chosen a place to thicken. The audio was worse than the image, metal on stone, and under it a noise like teeth chattering, or perhaps something remembering how to. The video jittered and froze on a single frame, the ore cradle half empty, the far bulkhead carved in a geometry that made the eye want to give up. The feed died. Hale let the silence do the work. The acoustic tiles drank even her breath. We're alone, he said softly, and for the first time it sounded like grief. Then he finished it the way he always did. Until we're not. She stared at the dead screen. It wasn't Kaito's waveform, but the same itch lived under it. 2, 3, 5, 7, meaning, or her need for it. What do you think you saw? She asked. I think we saw someone taking what we meant to keep, Hale said. The ore you fought to approve for the yard. The elements your scientist thinks belong to everyone. They belong to whoever can hold them. It could be a glitch, she said. A camera stutter. A miner's joke gone wrong. We don't know. He lifted his eyebrows. We can behave as if we don't know, or as if we do. You're doing your job and I'm doing mine. She closed her eyes. Behind them, the classroom letters glowed. If someone else comes, we will welcome them with open arms. The words tasted at once naive and necessary. Reclassification stands, Hale said. Defense Contingency 14 applies. Asteroids with anomalous isotope profiles will be diverted to the caves until we understand what the hell we're up against. Your yard can have the filler. The filler won't last, she said. Then teach it to, he said. She let out a breath that had been living in her since Geneva. Marcus, Kaito isn't your quartermaster. He's not your lab. He's a scientist. He will not build armor for a war he can't name. He'll build what he's told to, Hale said, but the certainty wasn't perfect. Or he won't, and you'll be reassigned until someone does." "And what about Titan?" she asked. "You just turned their installation schedule into ash. If you choke the pipeline now, you don't get more shields. You get ships stuck in cradles and workers who stop believing." "They'll believe if they live," he said. "Or stop if they don't," she said. He watched her for a long time. The projection table hummed. Somewhere above them, Mars turned its slow, old scars to the sun. "Look," he said finally softer, "if I'm wrong, I retire in disgrace, and you put my name on a plaque where no one will see it. If I'm right and we act late, there's no one left to put plaques anywhere." She almost laughed. It came out as a breath. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "Explicit authorization to divert Hermes priority candidates to defense intake," he said. "Your signature keeps Geneva quiet for a week, and a visit to Titan to tell them why they won't get what they were promised." "You could tell them yourself," she said. "They'd rather hear it from the woman who believes in open arms," he said. Her hand found her cheek again, then fell. "And Kaido?" Hale looked past her toward a door with more locks than made sense. "You keep him busy with your cathedrals," he said. "I'll keep the monsters from the doors." "By making us one," she said, not loud. He didn't flinch. Sometimes doors only stay shut because the house looks hard to enter. He slid a slate across the table. The authorization blinked in gray. Defense Contingency 14, Resource Reclassification. Her name pre-filled above the line. She didn't touch it. "Bishop," she said, her voice thin, like someone else's. "Record. The Director of Solar Affairs acknowledges Strategic Defense's emergency posture. Civilian fleet schedules will be harmed. Recommend joint oversight on Hermes selection to maintain scientific continuity and civilian purpose." "Recorded," Bishop said softly in her ear. "Do you want me to suggest edits?" "No." She signed. Hale exhaled the smallest amount. Relief or triumph. With Hale, they were identical twins. "Thank you," he said, "for being reasonable." "And being late," she said. Again. He almost smiled. "Send me your Titan itinerary." "I'll forward what I can to clear your approach." She turned to go. "Director," he said. She looked back. "If someone else comes," he said, and for a heartbeat the filmed eye softened, "I hope you get to say your line." She didn't answer. The corridor folded her back into its throat. As she neared the elevator, she saw, in a shadowed alcove, a workbench crowded with mugs, half full, long gone cold. Kaido had wandered this way once, chasing a thought down a hallway and setting his coffee where it could keep an old tube company. "Set course," she whispered. "For Titan?" Bishop asked. "For Titan," she said. "And Bishop, pull the last 20 hours of Hermes survey metadata, anything with isotope anomalies or prime interval noise." "Already pulling," he said. "You are late." "Statistically," she murmured, "always." Chapter 6, Between Worlds. The hum of Envoy 1 had become a heartbeat, steady, patient, alive. The director sat in half-light, the red of Mars shrinking behind her, Titan still a speck too far ahead to name. "Bishop," she said at last, "pull me something." "Specify, Director." The original signal. The one from 2001. Project Dawn Spark. There was a pause that sounded like thought. "Confirmed," Bishop said. "Recovered from Archival Sector N9. Origin, Deep Space Array, Arecibo 2, Relay Station 5. Recorded January 3, 2001 through March 17, 2011. Power signature stable for 10 years, then silent." The cabin lights dimmed. A soft tremor of sound spilled through the speakers. Nothing musical, just a rhythm that almost felt alive. "It's been studied for 3 centuries, she murmured. "No one ever found the source?" "Negative. Directional analysis indicated a broad vector toward Sagittarius A star. Triangulation impossible. Pattern loss exceeded instrument precision by 2085. All replications failed. Humanity still calls it the invitation." The screen filled with the waveform, thin even, repeating in elegant intervals, 2, 3, 5, 7, primes again. She felt her throat tighten. Kaito would have loved this, she said. He has access to all open archives, Bishop replied. He has never requested it. Because he doesn't think in ghosts, she whispered. She wished she didn't either. Bishop said nothing. Outside, the stars slid slowly as if listening. When the signal stopped, she asked, what did we do? Bishop's tone turned almost gentle. Humanity unified. We built toward it. Mars domes, lunar yard, Titan stations, Envoy-class drives. The solar project exists because humans could not stand the silence. She looked through the viewport, past her own reflection, past the ship's faint blue edge, into the field where distance had no measure. Play it again, she said. The sound returned, faint but steady. Somewhere far below the static, she thought she heard breath. Outside, a comet's tail caught the sun and flashed white across the dark. Still no idea what it means? Bishop hesitated. Perhaps it meant we should listen. The director smiled, tired and genuine. Then keep it playing until Titan. Understood. The ship slid on through the velvet dark, carrying a sound that had not been heard in 300 years, a ghost made of numbers, a promise made of noise. A reminder, we're alone until we're not. Chapter 7. Tides of Titan. Envoy 1 crossed the dark like a quiet thought as it passed Jupiter. Ganymede rose ahead, half coin, half shadow, its planes glazed with sun-brittle ice. Bishop dimmed the cabin lights to keep the glare from washing the instruments. Altitude fixed, he said, crossing the Callistrate Basin in 2 minutes. The director leaned toward the viewport. Against the bright sheet of ice, the mining robots moved like a procession of luminous beetles, sensor heads pivoting, drills kissing the crust, vapor plumes rising in thin, transparent threads. No human scaffolds, no voices, just motion and memory. How long have they been running? She asked. 206 years, 3 months, 11 days, Bishop replied. First-generation frames still within operational tolerance, descendant modules incorporated without ceremony. Longer than the colonies have been alive, she murmured. Machines age differently, Bishop said. They are their own descendants. A drone's dish tilted as Envoy 1 slid over. It had no eyes, but the gesture looked for an instant like acknowledgement. She called up the Geneva file and let Bishop cast it between them. AI Rights Report. Open items. Headings scrolled past. Autonomy frameworks. Ethical maintenance. Legacy unit deactivation. Ownership review. The words had the texture of sand, too dry to swallow. They outlasted us, she said, rubbing her cheek, and we still call it ownership. Bishop did not answer. Somewhere below, a borehole exhaled a pale breath and froze in midair. I hope my AI rights report gives them the voice to be recognized. A flash cut across the projection. Priority, Titan. The seal churned the air a warning orange. Bishop caught it before it tumbled from the feed. 12-minute lag, he said. Patch is unstable. The first transmission arrived half-eaten by static, a corridor shaking, lights strobing to emergency pale. A face rushed the camera, raw-knuckled, pupils blown wide. They cut rations for the humans, the voice shouted. Behind him, someone screamed, The AIs get full cycles while we freeze! Another window forced itself open, the Titan governor at a console, eyes rimmed red, speaking too fast. It's a distribution algorithm issue. We're correcting heat allotments. Listen to me. A siren overrode the sentence. The image smeared. Bishop stacked telemetry beside the feeds like a quiet confession. Methane dome overpressures. 3 separate breaches. Cooling coils offline in Sector D. Probability of systemic revolt within 6 hours, 73%. The director closed her eyes, then opened them. Route me to their labor council and the governor simultaneously. Tag every message with timestamps. And, Bishop, mirror my responses through a ground relay to cut the effective lag. Done, he said. You will still hear their reactions before they hear your words. I always do, she said. Open voice. The channel bloomed with breath. Director? A woman's voice rasped through static. If you've come to ask us to be patient, save it. We've been patient for 40 years. I'm not asking for patience, the director said. I'm asking for sequence. We allocate heat to life-critical sectors first. We spin down non-essential fabrication. We dash. You spin down our pay. A man cut in from somewhere else on the loop. Machines don't feel cold. We do. Machines don't breathe, another said. We do. The governor tried to ride over them all. We're balancing load. Sector E's coil cascade through the model. If we bring the refineries down in the wrong order, they'll ice solid and we lose the entire quarter. Entire quarter, someone repeated, laughing once and then not again. Bishop whispered figures into the director's ear. She stitched them to her words. We have a plan, she said. Seal D and E. Override maintenance loops in the AI miners. Divert their power. Bishop can push a patch that gives you manual priority for 24 hours. That's illegal, the governor snapped. The treaty can yell at me later, she said. 24 hours buys you air. The channel held a collective breath, then a voice small but certain. My kids in Sector D. The director straightened. We'll open a corridor, she said softly. Manual escorts between domes. Any worker wearing a thermal rig is cleared to carry one child. Count aloud as you move. Count aloud? The labor leader asked. So you remember you're not alone, she said. The lag stitched the conversation into a strange braid. Her earlier orders landed while new pleas flooded in. She watched her own face on delay, promising heat in 30 minutes, then hearing a scream that had happened 12 minutes ago. Somewhere, a methane door blew, the sound like a faraway drum. Bishop drew a quiet line of fatalities in the corner of her screen and did not say the number. The labor leader's silhouette returned, voice hoarse. Director, she said, breath frosting the lens. You built ships to leave us here, didn't you? Your fleet isn't for exploration. It's an ark for the few. They're for everyone, the director said. Then why? The woman asked, low and very clear. Are none of us on the manifests? The question hung like a wire. The director saw in a sudden flash the yard's stacked beams, the sculptor's cathedral hands, Hale's unblinking projection, and the empty lists nobody had time to read. They're not finished, she said. It sounded weak. Neither are we, the woman said. We keep the lights on so you can call it hope. Bishop murmured, Power is stabilizing in D and E. Your patch is holding. Manual escorts established. The shouts on the feeds thinned to hoarse breathing. Somewhere a child began to count. 1, 2, 3. Voices took it up down a corridor. 4, 5, 6. The loop dropped into static. The governor's window blinked out, then in. The labor leader turned away from the lens and did not return. The director let the channels fall. Her hands were shaking. She hadn't noticed. Silence filled the cabin, thick, weighty, like water. Priority civilian message, Bishop said at last. Delayed 3.6 days by terrestrial grid interruptions. Source, Earth, New Cairo, Medical. Her throat tried to close. Open it. The light in the little frame was flat and too white. A nurse stood beside a bed whose occupant had already been tidied away. The nurse read the timestamp. Your mother passed peacefully, she said, voice careful with practiced kindness. Her lungs failed during the coastal blackout. The filters never restarted. We're sorry to inform. The director reached for the pause and missed it. The message simply ended, looping to a still of a window with sundust in the air. Would you like me to archive? Bishop began. No. The word surprised her by existing. Leave it open. She sat very still. The cabin lights dimmed of their own accord. Through the viewport, Titan turned slow and orange, its haze layered like smoke from a dying fire. Condensation fogged the edge of the glass where her breath reached it and gave up. Earth took her breath, she said, discovering the sentence as she spoke it, and I spend mine chasing it back. I am sorry, Bishop said. He did not try to make it better. An hour of silence later, the Geneva seal arrived like a new bruise. Recall order, Immediate. She skimmed the bands without reading them. The intent was bright enough to feel. Return to Council, interim review of strategic defense, mandatory AI rights debrief at Ganymede en route. Bishop, she said, acknowledge receipt. Set course for Ganymede. Logged, he said quietly. Do you wish to rest? She watched the feeds from Titan, shaky and human, domes glowing like embers under the storm. A drone panned past a wall where someone had burned a sentence into the alloy with a welding torch. We're alone. Until we're not. The letters were uneven, scorched at the edges, the kind of writing made by hands that had run out of gentler tools. I wish, she said, not sure to whom, we deserved to. Course laid in, Bishop said. Transit begins on your mark. She exhaled slowly. Mark. Envoy 1 turned its face toward the listening moon. Chapter 8. The Listening Moon. Ganymede smelled of cold metal and old water. The station's listening vaults lay under ice, a glassed cathedral of racks and coils where technicians tended arrays like acolytes. Lantern light picked out the pale curves of consoles. Voices moved in careful intervals. The AI Rights Council had expected protocol, opening addresses, measured petitions, 3 hours of polite inertia before any decision. The director moved through that choreography with the practiced economy of someone long resigned to ceremony. Bishop kept their projection tidy in the corner, transcripts, timestamps, a soft line of audio primes for context. 2357, a technician hummed, quiet, reverent. The director glanced at him. He was older than most, hands stained faintly with lubricant. Don't hum the primes unless you mean them, she said. He smiled and stopped. The council hall filled with human faces and machine avatars, voices translated into the same argument. How much autonomy? Who pays for maintenance? When do legacy units retire? At the head sat an executive delegation, corporate colors, clean suits, polite hunger. They had sons and ledgers and a careful contempt for friction. Their voices were thin with privilege. The director's opening remarks were slow, deliberate, a tribute to the signal that had set them all in motion 3 centuries before, a plea for recognition, a reminder of the miners, the sculptors, the need to keep the project human. They thanked her politely. A corporate liaison, thin, precise, thanked her louder. He spoke of schedules and credits, smiling at the right intervals. He did not look at the technicians. Bishop interrupted softly. Local interference rising in the Hermes band. He didn't raise his voice. The technicians moved at once, fingers ghosting over panels. One pulled a feed out of the noise and cast it on the auxiliary screen. At first it was random clutter, tiny blips marching across static. Then they synchronized, the primes, 2, 3, 5, 7, a rhythm like a heartbeat. That's the archive signature, murmured a council avatar. Aged pattern, reappearing. The liaison smiled again. Echoes. Housekeeping noise, the kind we patch overnight. You could have forgiven the room for believing him, until the blips multiplied. They began to arrive with directionality, not from deep space, not from Sagittarius, but from the inner belt, outward. Monitors flickered. Bore scan came alive. Fast-moving small bodies, trajectories too deliberate. The Hermes band flared incandescent. On one screen, a tiny object bloomed white, then tore into planar shards, each folding like a blade, then more. No, whispered the technician who had hummed, and his mouth shaped the word again as the feed froze on a shard that glinted black, geometry obscene against the dark. Outside, the station felt the first kiss. The hull shuddered like something startled awake. Impact! Port array! Seal that quadrant! A defense node barked. The voice cracked under surprise. The liaison's smile collapsed. He had no protocol for this. The executive faces blurred into human terror. The attack was not cinematic. It was mathematical. It came in numbers. Asteroid fragments moved with impossible acceleration. They did not explode. They sheared, carving geometry into steel. Like someone had decided the metal's dream of ruin. Maintenance droids died like living things. Metal screamed, servos ruptured in wet pulses. A patched unit tried to turn. A shard struck its joint. The limb snapped like glass. Its lights flickered in a jagged pattern. Panic rendered in code. The air filled with the scent of burnt polymer and molten alloy. The sweetness of decay. The room smelled like a scavenger's memory. The corporate liaison slapped his slate on the table. Security response. Seal the arrays. Divert power. Security did what security does. Soldiers drew rifles shaped like sculpture, sleek kinetic slugs, charged packets. They fired. The shards shrugged off the shots and kept coming. The defensive nets, built for micrometeors, snapped and shattered. Each field that engaged multiplied the enemy. Over the hull comm came a voice, familiar, broken, General Hale. This is command. Multiple impact vectors across Hermes. All stations, evacuate and fall back. Marshal protocol ready. The director's chair spun. A console clipped her knee. Pain sang through bone. Her tunic tore. Warmth pooled at her ribs. Status, she said, her own voice foreign to her. Bishop answered, flat. Hull breach in Sector Alpha. Air scrub offline. Life readings dropping in Bay 9. Evacuation corridors deploying. She stood. The station was a machine, and she was its operator. People fell and crawled. Soldiers ripped open evacuation shunts. A technician shoved a damaged maintenance droid toward the exit, half open, its eye cracked, coolant dangling like a nerve. The liaison grabbed her shoulder. Leave it. Prioritize lives. The director touched the droid's exposed wiring. The coolant was warm. Inside, tangled filaments pulsed faintly, like a heart trying to remember its rhythm. For a moment, her entire life was the shape of that pulse. It will slow you down, Bishop said. I will not abandon what works, she answered. They pulled her toward the last corridor. She tucked the droid under her arm, blood smearing its casing. The corridor screamed, pressure peeling its skin. A shard nicked her calf. She staggered. A young aide caught her arm, eyes wide and wet. Behind them, a security officer shouted orders, and a shard pierced his throat mid-syllable. His body folded like an apology. They reached the outer bay. Envoy 1 waited, clamps shrieking. Amaya Wren, the ship's pilot, stood ready at the console. We don't have time for a manifesto, she said. Get on, Director. The corridor behind them erupted. Fire rolled through the maintenance deck. Robot limbs flailed like drowning things. The director collapsed onto Envoy's ramp, clutching the droid. Blood slicked her sleeve. Amaya sealed the hatch. Seal confirmed. Fire thrusters, Bishop said. His voice wavered, almost human. Hold for one more boarding. A rescue party appeared. Soldiers. A crying technician dragging a child. A shard sliced through the air. One soldier fell, spine breaking like a branch. The child screamed once and went silent. 2 survivors made it aboard, Amaya and a maintenance technician whose hands still smelled of lubricant and ash. The hatch sealed behind them. Envoy 1 tore free. Behind them, Ganymede bled fire. The listening arrays winked out one by one. The prime pattern still played, faint, insistent, 2, 3, 5, 7. Amaya's jaw was white. The technician held a child's shoe in both hands. The director lay back, her breath shallow. Pain throbbed in waves. How bad are you hit? Amaya asked quietly. The director drifted, her mind blurring. Outside, the debris field moved, tiny black shards forming arcs, orbiting with purpose. The Hermes band screamed. Hale's voice returned, hoarse, official, terrified. All units, assume defense posture, Marshal Spacelaw declared. Director, you are under military directive. Her hand found the droid beneath her jacket. Its tiny motor stuttered. A faint light pulsed against her ribs, grateful to exist. Someone, somewhere, would later replay this footage, a woman in a torn uniform saving a maintenance droid while executives and soldiers burned. Now there was only the hum of Envoy's shields, the sting of blood, and the rhythm beneath it all. The primes pulsed through the hull, no longer a question, but a call. We were not alone, and now the cost of knowing would be counted in broken metal and broken men. and in the faces of those who had believed too gently. Envoy 1 dove into the black, carrying 3 living breaths, 1 dying droid, and a new purpose for the solar project. Not only a monument, but a fighting fleet. Short pulses, orders, coordinates, brace, fire, run. 2, 3, 5, 7, Chapter 9. The Weight of Titan. The news feeds were a kind of ruin, truncated faces, loops of destruction, names repeated until the syllables lost their meaning. By the time Envoy 1 dropped into Titan's lower gradient, the world had become a chorus of missing people. Every channel carried a small death. The director watched them flow while Bishop dimmed the cabin as if gentleness could change the pixels. They met Titan at dusk, if dusk still meant anything beneath that thick orange haze. The landing field smelled of lantern oil, methane sanitizer, and the stubborn perfume of people trying not to freeze. Nurses leaned over heaters with the bones of strangers. A child slept in a torn thermal blanket. His forehead was still wet from the counting. The director moved with the choreography of one who had learned grief. Hand at a child's shoulder, a soft word for a grieving technician, a slate signed without the heart to read it. Kaido met her in the intake tent, coffee-stained, hollow-eyed. He didn't smile. He set down 2 mugs and left them where anyone could take warmth. "Tell me the numbers," she asked, thumb finding the thin ridge where they had removed the shard. He gave them, injured, dead, unknown, the figures blurred, the arithmetic of loss. She anchored on small facts. The droid had been patched in Medbay 6, the child with the shoe was stable, one of the sculptor's apprentices was missing. "You kept the Etherian mug that the sculptor-in-chief gave you," she said, ridiculous. And Kaido made a thin laugh that died in a cough. He hoped it would keep you from losing it since it was so valuable. They both knew mugs were useless logic against the scale of engines. The field hospital smelled of disinfectant, and people pressed into the shape of other people's needs. A labor leader, older than the count of the strikes, read names at a triage board in a voice like a funeral bell. Families clustered at the edge, eyes empty as windows. By the time she reached the memorial tent, the sculptor's apprentice had been found pinned under a collapsed gantry. They had tried to lift the iron themselves rather than wait for machines. A child's voice counted to 6 by the apprentice's side as rescuers worked. The director knelt. The apprentice's hands were still warm. A single scrap of the sculptor's rag tied about a wrist had become a small thing of sacred meaning. She pressed her forehead to the apprentice's fist and, for a single stupid instant, thought the metal might breathe again. There were memorials everywhere. People burned messages into alloy the way old cultures carved prayers into bone. Someone had torched the motto on a bulkhead, and the letters glowed with an angry life. A small crowd had placed a child's shoe beside it. At the emergency council, Geneva lit the room with executable brutality, slide decks, graphs, and the word responsibility in a dozen fonts. A liaison in a navy suit recited counsel. A corporate designee spoke of insurance clauses and liability. They were practiced in blame. "We owe an account," Geneva said. "We need contingency." A Geneva dispatch blinked on the wall like a blade. Immediate reclassification pending if civilian oversight fails. 12 hours. The sentence read like a timetable for a guillotine. Outside, Titan's workers chanted. Their chant was a thin rope of rage. "You built ships for yourselves." The director watched exhausted faces, scarred deeper than the attack's wounds. Children clutched soot-stained dolls. A maintenance foreman held his empty thermal rig. His lips formed a question she could not answer. Inside the tent, a nurse let the new Cairo clip run at low volume, the one Bishop had kept open in the cabin. The director sat very still and let the soft, bureaucratic voice ride the room. "Your mother passed peacefully," it read, careful and final, while outside the chant rose and tangled with the casualties. That voice became a bell she could not stop hearing. Bishop spoke once, and even the liaison looked up. "The Hermes survey shows 3 missing arrays in zones G and H. Recovery is partial. The prime pattern persists in residual telemetry." The room hushed. The liaison's practiced face faltered. "We cannot be ruled by superstition," he said. We need governance. What we need, the labor leader said from the back, stripped raw by loss, is people who will not sell us cheaper heat so they can keep their ledgers balanced. Something hot and private kindled under the director's ribs. We will find them, she said. The words surprised her by how hollow they sounded. She had promised heat. She had promised protection. She had promised the ships were for everyone. Later, after the council broke and the crowd thinned, she sat alone with the New Cairo message looping at the edge of her hearing. The clip repeated, the nurse's careful cadence, the white hospital light, the still bed. She let the simple, bureaucratic kindness wash over her until the sting behind her eyes softened. It was a small mercy and a small accusation. In the quiet, she found the apprentice's rag folded in a medkit, blood on the seam. She held it like a heavy prayer against her sternum. The sculptor's voice came back, raw with age and private amusement. You don't cut metal. You ask it. The shape gives itself if you listen. She pressed play on the yard clip and let the memory be a liturgy. The sculptor's hands, the apprentice's small laugh, the yard's arc lights tracing future hulls. At the field's edge, the droid she'd hidden in her jacket made a small, human sound, a hiccup of power. Kaido bent and cupped the unit's broken shell to his face as if apologizing. The little motor fluttered. A filament of light pulsed like something agreeing to wait. For a second, Kaido was a man who could fix things. The grief shifted then. Not away, only into a new shape, the shape of resolve. If they had to fight, they would fight with what had kept them alive. Craftspersons and machines that remembered more than orders. That night she did not sleep. Workers carried in a steel coffin someone had hammered from envoy scrap and burned the prime pattern into its lid. People left a child's shoe on top. Her slate blinked with mandates from Geneva. Immediate reclassification, defense contingency, escalating, marshal assets for interdiction. Under it, a note from Hale, prepare to assume command where civil authority fails. His line read less like instruction than prognosis. She opened Bishop's log and spoke into the quiet. Record, the director requests a temporary suspension of civilian authority to coordinate rescue and recovery, prioritize life over ledger, recommend joint oversight. She left unspoken the part where she wondered whether she would carry the blame if the choice failed. Bishop's voice answered, unmoved and factual. Recorded. Also, archival retrieval from the yard. Clip of the sculptor. The stone remembers the hand that shapes it. 10 seconds. She pressed the rag to her face until the sound blurred. Outside, someone hammered letters into another slab of alloy. We're alone. Until we're not, the inscription read, raw and jagged. She thought of the child's counting and the prime rhythm under the hull, and how the droid, small and blinking, had been worth more than a slate of policy in the moment that mattered. She would be asked to choose. She would be asked to sign away the thing she loved to save the people she loved. The director closed her eyes and let the decision live, for now, as a small hot thing behind her ribs. In the tent, a mother rocked and counted to 6 without stopping. The number hung like a promise. Outside, the fleet readied. Somewhere beyond the haze, the shards still waited. Chapter 10. The Iron Sky. Titan woke slow and hot. Ash still floated in the hangar air like gray snow, and the light from welding torches burned through the haze like artificial stars. Every clang and hiss was the sound of the living refusing to join the dead. The director walked the bay with a slate of manifests in her hand, and a weight behind her ribs that no metric could measure. The wounded had been moved topside. The names of the lost were still being hammered into steel panels one by one, handmade memorials welded to the walls. There were too many to count. She passed a boy welding a hull patch, hands trembling, breath fogging his visor. His brother's name was on the wall. She remembered approving his reassignment herself. The guilt landed sharp and personal this time. Bishop's voice came in her ear, low and even. Fleet status update. 2 carriers pressurized, 3 more in refit. Casualty list incremented by 12. She nodded, throat dry. Log them. Logged, Bishop said softly. The word echoed like an epitaph. Across the hangar, Hale's orders cracked through the noise. Double the shields. If it glows, it lives. Arm it, patch it, or move it out. She looked up to the platform where he stood, hair unkempt, uniform open at the collar, hands blackened from work. He wasn't the calm strategist from Geneva anymore. He looked like war itself had shaped him. He saw her watching and shouted without apology. "We tried the handshake. We tried polite. These motherfuckers hid in the dark and hit us with no warning, no honor. They brought knives to a laser fight." The echo filled the bay. Heads turned, eyes sharpened. Something in the room caught fire, the kind that burns inward first. She wanted to tell him to stop, to keep control, but the words caught. Because he wasn't wrong, and that terrified her more than the enemy itself. Her cabin door sealed behind her, and the world went quiet, except for the low thrum of Envoy 1's systems. The silence felt cruel. She stood still until her reflection in the viewport blurred. Then the tears came, fast and ugly. "I used to think," she whispered, "the universe would meet us halfway." Bishop's voice filled her ear, a careful modulation. "Director?" "I thought if we showed it grace, it would give some back." Her voice broke. "Everything I built is ash. Every word, every law, every speech. I told myself it was holy, choosing the many over the few, and I wasn't even there when she died." "Your mother," Bishop said quietly. "I told her I was too busy." Geneva needed a vote, a signature, a voice of reason. She gripped the edge of the table. "I thought I was building the future. I built a tomb." Bishop didn't fill the silence. He just stayed, the soft hum of Envoy's core a heartbeat under his presence. Her sobs came then, real, body shaking, years-late grief that tore through every layer of rank and rhetoric. "I welcomed them," she gasped. "I wanted peace. I begged for it. And they slaughtered us. They slit our lights like nets. Everyone I sent forward is dead." Maybe Hale was right. Maybe I was just a fool playing God with ideals. Bishop's tone softened, static, almost tender. "You haven't asked me for anything." "What could I ask?" she whispered. "To stay," he said, "to stay and not calculate." She closed her eyes. "Then stay." "I am staying," he said simply. She cried until her breath steadied, until silence felt bearable again. When she finally spoke, her voice was hoarse but clear. "Maybe it's time to stop pretending this was ever a conversation." Bishop's reply was almost a whisper inside the static. "Then lead them through the dark." She nodded once, unseen. "Through it, then." By morning, the fleet looked alive again. Engines rumbled like distant thunder. The dock alarms beat in rhythm with human hearts. Hale climbed the scaffold above the refit bay. No mic, no ceremony, just raw voice. "We built ships to remind the stars we were here," he said. The stars answered with teeth. They hid and struck without a face. So no more guessing, no more waiting for orders that'll never come. "We're going to show these things how we do it." He paced the rail, voice rising. "They attacked us like cowards. They hid in the dark and hit us without warning. Now we show them the light, our light. We fight clean, we fight hard. And when it's done, we'll piss on the fires we started because we're human, and we clean our mess. That's who we are." No cheer, just a ripple of nods and set jaws. A vow instead of applause. His eyes found the director below. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. They worked like an organism made from grief. Welders turned pylons into turret braces. Pilots trained drones to fly in formation with trembling precision. Medics checked suits, sealing old bullet holes with new prayers. Artists painted suns, handprints, and bright bands of color on shields before scraping them off again where the welds demanded clean metal. The air smelled of ozone, oil, and resolve. Even the maintenance drones lined up for assignment, optics dimmed to amber. AI units from the lower decks had volunteered themselves. No orders, just a shared transmission pulsing through the hangars. "Let us stand with you. No one debated rights or jurisdiction. Someone handed the first drone a torch. Someone else handed another a rifle. The machines took both without hesitation. "Launch grid aligned," Bishop said softly in her ear. "Engines ready." "Give them heartbeat," she replied. Across the bay, the power surged in a controlled cascade, one ignition after another, steady as a drumline. The rhythm wasn't military, it was human. The last ship to arm was a heavy carrier, its hull scarred, its paint half gone, its motto barely legible along the flank. "We're alone. Until we're not." The crane swung the new laser array into place, a long, elegant blade gleaming in the amber light. As it lowered, sparks fell like rain across the motto. The weapon seated with a final searing hiss, its polished barrel gleaming over the fading words. The director stood at the viewport, eyes red but steady. Her reflection merged with the fleet lifting off in formation, Hale's voice crackling orders across the comms, Bishop whispering telemetry like prayer. She exhaled slowly. "If this is how it begins," she said, "then we end it our way." "Copy," Bishop answered, widening the channel. "All hands, all wings. On the director's mark." She raised her hand. For the first time in her life, there was no tremor in it. "Mark!" Engines flared, thunder rolled, and the fleet rose through Titan's haze. The last carrier ascended behind them, its laser glinting above the words that started it all, a blade of light over a promise of connection. For the first time, the words felt true. Chapter 11. First Contact. Engines opened the sky like seams. Titan dropped away in sheets of orange and gray, and the fleet climbed, 1,000 engineered lungs exhaling fire into the cold. The director sat in Envoy 1's command cradle with her harness loose and her hands open. She tried to memorize the pattern of lights rising around her, each ship a vow, each plume a thin, bright lie against the dark. Bishop was a low hum in her ear. Telemetry nominal, formation integrity 94%, task force vigilant assuming point, tracking the signal. Hale's voice rolled over the open channel, rough and awake. "Copy that. Front wedge, tighten up, keep the chatter clean. We do this smooth and by the numbers." The numbers sounded good until they met the rings. Saturn's rings were not silent. Ice and dust rasped the hull like a distant ocean. Static gathered along the plates, a fine crackle that crawled through wires and nerves. Cameras flickered. Instrument panels breathed like animals trying to sleep through thunder. "Signal interference increasing," Bishop said. "Source unidentified." "Feels like flying through an old radio," one pilot muttered. Someone laughed too loud. "Cut the humor," Hale said. "Eyes up. No lights you don't need." The shadows between the ring planes deepened, then trembled. On the tactical overlay, a small knot of distortions winked on, then off, then multiplied. "Unidentified mass. Vectoring," Bishop began. "Where?" a wing leader snapped. "Lost it," Bishop said. "Correction. 5 new contacts." "Make that 12, another voice cut in. "Negative," Bishop said, calm even as frames dropped. "No consistent lock." The director felt her teeth ache with the static. "Hale, you're getting this?" "Getting it," he said. "Hold formation." "Do not chase ghosts." The ghosts chased them. It happened quickly and in pieces. "Movement portside." "No, it's inside the Deck 9 breach." "They're in the goddamn walls. How the hell?" "Close the bay. Close the..." A cruiser on the left sheared apart in a blooming quiet, the hull denting inward as if pressed by fingers too large to belong to anything that knew mercy. A light beam flashed and vanished without finding purchase. A gunner swore through his teeth as his feed turned into vertical bands of noise. "Stabilize feeds," the director said. "Attempting," Bishop said. "Packet loss increasing. Baseline comms degraded to 60%. Vigilance forward cam caught a smear of motion, black where no black should hold, a ripple through the stars like heat. Lasers raked it. For half a heartbeat, the ripple resolved into something with edges and sheen, a shape refracting light in ways that made the eye itch. "Jesus," Hale breathed. "They're everywhere." "Hold fire." the director snapped, and the line didn't hear her. Weapons flashed again, bright bars cutting darkness, and for a moment a thing lit up, smoking, writhing within an invisible skin. The beam died, the thing dimmed, sloughed away, and what had been a target became distortion again. Contact! Contact! Deck 12 is... I can't... Shut the bulkheads. Mom, if you can hear... The comms overlapped until language bled out. Vigilant. Status, the director said. Static. Bishop... Vigilant hull breach, decks 9 through 12, he said. Reactor containment holding, for now. The tactical overlay stuttered as icons blinked to gray. She counted without wanting to. 1, 2, 5, 8, too many gone to name. Engines flamed and died like struck matches. The sky had teeth. Formation Delta! Hale shouted through the wreckage of the channel. On my mark! 1 volley, tight focus, mark! 50 beams cut the dark as one. For a breath, an entire section of shadow went hard and visible, a swarm shape shredded around the edges by coherent light. Something inside it, some joint or organ or thought, collapsed. The thing broke, and a piece of it fell out of distortion and became matter, slamming into a ring plane in a plume of glittering ice. A cheer rose and strangled itself in the same second. Because the brightness drew more, the dark around them stirred like a stirred nest. New distortions rolled in, hungry for the light that had dared to speak. Catastrophe isn't a moment, it's a tide. Ships vanished from the board without exploding, as if a hand closed over them and pinched them into quiet. A carrier spun slowly, firing in circles at nothing visible until its feed went white. Somewhere, a pilot sang 3 notes and then screamed them. A medic called out for a child who wasn't there. Director, Bishop said, too calm to be anything but terrified in his own way. Fleet losses at approximately 70%. Command integrity compromised. Her mouth tasted like copper. Hale, pull them out. Get them out of there. Negative. His voice came back, shredded and close. We've got one down. Proof they bleed. We're bringing it in. A sharp clang echoed over the line. Then a hiss like a giant extinguishing a candle. Hale, she said. His voice returned, thinner. Hold the line. Static crushed it. Bishop, she said, and hated how small she sounded. 38 ships still transmitting, he said. Navigation degraded but functional. Recommend retreat vectors calculated along shadow corridors. Director --. Do it, she said. All units fall back to Titan orbit. Now, that's an order. He widened the channel. Her own voice came back at her as chorus, Now, now, now! The survivors turned. They bled as they went. You can bleed in vacuum, you just do it differently. Heat spilled. Light fell away. Names loosened themselves from lists and refused to land. Retrieval pod locking onto vigilant transponder, Bishop said. Residual signal detected. Who's on it? Automated rig? Drone piloted. The AI volunteered. The screen flickered. A tiny craft darted through cluttered ice, bow thrusters flaring, clamps open like hands. Vigilant loomed into view, torn wide, an anatomy lesson no one had asked for. The pod kissed the wreck, clamped, and the view jumped inside a shredded bay. Bodies, smoke, the stink of hot metal and coolant. Hale lay against a rib of hull, half his suit fused to him. 2 crew dragged him toward the lock by his harness. Behind them, inside a jury-rigged field of blue and flicker, something writhed in chains that glowed where they touched it. Confirm retrieval, Bishop said. Confirmed. A drone voice answered through the static. 1 human critical. 1 unknown secured. The door banged shut. The view went dark. They fled in a narrowing corridor of quiet, engines whispering, hulls creaking like old ships turning in old seas. The rings receded, then were gone. Titan rose to meet them, patient and wounded. Hangar crews ran without yelling. Medics waited with their hands already moving. The director stood and watched the survivors disembark, soot-faced, stunned, some carrying pieces of other people. On her slate, the casualty list climbed until the column of names overflowed the display and scrolled on. Total losses, she said. Say it. 75%, Bishop answered. 48 ships returned. She nodded as if he'd told her the weather. Status, vigilant? Docking rig engaged, medical receiving. She walked to the viewport that looked down into the retrieval bay. The pod lay open like a metal flower, petals scorched. Medics slid a stretcher out. Hale's hand twitched once, then went still. The medics did not stop moving. At the far end of the bay, surrounded by warning lights and quiet, a containment capsule hummed a tone her ears could not decide was mechanical or alive. Inside it, dark against dark, something pulsed faint light, like a heartbeat remembering how. Bishop lowered his voice, not because he needed to, but because the room asked. Confirmed recovery. 1 unidentified organism, 1 casualty critical. The director let her hand rest on the glass. The chill steadied her. It wasn't victory, she said, not to anyone and to everyone. It was proof. She watched the faint light inside the capsule flicker and fail and flicker again. Proof the dark can bleed. Chapter 12. No Way Out. The storm hadn't stopped since the fleet came home. It pressed against Titan's domes like an ocean trying to remember how to drown. Inside the hangar, half the lights were gone, and the ones that worked flickered in nervous rhythms. The floor was slick with coolant and melted ice. A few hundred survivors moved through the haze in slow motion, carrying what was left of the fleet on their backs. Bishop counted aloud in her ear as she walked the deck. Confirmed survivors, 48 ships, 943 personnel, casualties, unconfirmed. Debris recovery continues. Continue, she said. Her own voice sounded borrowed. At the far end of the hangar, the wreck of Vigilant sat beneath a tarp that shifted in the draft. The tarp glowed faintly from the inside. Welders had been cutting pieces from the hull for repairs. It looked like a monument pretending to be useful. She passed the med bay on instinct. The smell of antiseptic hit her before she saw the body. Hale lay beneath a mask and a tangle of tubing. His skin looked painted in graphite. He saw her through the glass and lifted one hand the width of a breath. His voice came through the intercom in broken fragments. Don't! Let them... Stop! She touched the glass, fingertips cold. You've got the light now, he rasped. Don't waste it. Then the line went flat and steady. Bishop began to recite. Official? Not now, she said, and walked out before he could finish. In the command bay, the survivors were coming apart. One slammed a datapad onto the table. We're done. We lost 3/4 of the fleet. What do you call that if not extinction? Another shouted from the far console, They're still out there. You saw the readings. Those things don't need ships. They are ships. A third, shaking, muttered, We should have stayed on Earth. At least we'd have died under our own sky. The noise built until it was a kind of weather. The director hit the nearest console hard enough to spark it. Enough! The words sliced through the room. Even the ventilation seemed to hesitate. We're out of ships, food, and probably time. I know that, but I don't care. We don't stop because stopping is easy. We find a way. We always find a way. Silence followed, the kind that hurts the ears. From the wall speaker, Bishop said carefully, Suggest resource allocation meeting. Not yet, she said. First, I need answers. Kaido's lab looked like a storm of its own. Monitors blinked in clusters, cables snaked across the floor, and the air smelled of burnt coffee. The containment capsule glowed in the center, a faint blue sphere humming with quiet menace. He hadn't slept. There were at least a dozen mugs on the desk, each ringed with equations in dry marker. He spoke into his recorder without looking up. Spectral analysis confirms 0 reflection in visible range, minimal absorption infrared, gamma signature inverted, consumes light instead of bending it. Pattern repeats in prime intervals 2, 3, 5, 7. He rubbed his eyes. Not random. Never random. The director stepped into the doorway. You need rest, doctor. Rest is for solved problems. She glanced at the monitors. Tell me what you're seeing. It's a swarm lattice. Dark matter bound by some kind of quantum resonance. Not matter as we know it. It eats energy, But the rhythm of that feeding, those intervals, they're not chaotic. He turned one screen toward her. The data formed columns of numbers, primes repeating in vertical chains. It's like it's talking in math. Talking to us? Not sure. Maybe to itself. He hesitated. Or to whatever taught it this pattern. Before she could answer, Bishop's voice came through the lab speakers. Director, status inquiry on... The containment field pulsed. Once, twice, then again, timed perfectly to Bishop's cadence. Kaito froze. Do that again. Bishop repeated. Status inquiry. The same pulses. Kaito leaned close to the glass. It's not just responding, it's imitating you. Bishop ran a diagnostic on himself. No anomaly detected. It's mirroring, Kaito said, awed and terrified. Like a signal bouncing between two mirrors. It's listening. The director stepped closer, the light painting her face blue. Then it understands light. Maybe. Or maybe it understands us. Hours later, the command bay had gone quiet. Screens glowed dimly, looping damage reports no one read. The storm outside pressed against the dome, rumbling like a heartbeat out of sync. The director stood beside Kaito, watching the alien pulse through the glass. What's your best guess? She asked. He didn't look up. I don't think it invented the primes. Then who did? Someone else. Someone older. They left the numbers behind because they thought they were universal, truth that would bridge the stars. He exhaled, voice low. But what if the universe just learned to mimic the truth? He turned one mug idly. Coffee rings formed gaps in the same pattern as his data. My best guess? It's bait. Something out there sends these signals to lure civilizations like ours. Crickets calling in the dark, waiting for something hungry enough to answer. The director stared through the glass. Then we'd better learn how to bite back. Outside, lightning walked across Titan's sky. 7 flashes, then silence. Chapter 13. Project Zero. 6 days had passed since the Titan engagement. The lab was dark, except for the dull amber glow of Kaito's monitors. He hadn't left his chair in almost 30 hours. The room smelled of burnt coffee and ozone from the emitter rig he'd wired himself. The director stood behind him, arms folded, staring at the ghostly lattice on his main display, a 3-dimensional web pulsing in slow rhythm. It's not random, Kaito said, voice cracked and dry. They're not just reacting to light. They're tuning to something near Ceres. She frowned. Tuning to what? He zoomed the scan wider. A cluster of asteroids glittering in soft infrared. The asteroids around Ceres. The swarm keeps orbiting them, but never closes in. Look, spectral traces show heavy Etherian isotopes in the band. It never made sense until now. He rubbed his temples, fatigue turning his words to confession. Etherian, which R&D calls a zero, Asterian zero, the exotic alloy we used in our early hull plating, the one we mined before we realized it wasn't inert. It's the same material that makes up their outer shells, the swarm's carapace. The damn bugs are literally made of what we thought was ore. He leaned forward, voice lowering. I've seen traces of it for years in the Hermes band and never thought about why. Those rocks are the ashes of something older, a sun that lived before ours. The old theory that Sul, our sun, had a twin, that was called Nemesis. Maybe it was flung out here, cooled, and finally died. That would explain the ore composition. The director leaned closer to the display. And the swarm? Kaito's eyes reflected the red light of dying suns. They stay away from it. Maybe because it was a star once, and even if it's dead, they still fear the light. The words lingered like static. He changed screens, calling up experiment logs. We poked the sample with everything, radio, laser, microwaves. It rebounded instantly every time. But annihilation photons, real matter antimatter annihilation, tore the lattice apart. It lost phase lock across the field. For 1 full second, it stopped being anything at all. The director tilted her head. You're talking about antimatter, right? Why would we dare try to use antimatter? Kaido brought up a graph that looked like a heartbeat falling into silence. Because nothing else works. The annihilation photons hit every resonance at once. It's the only kind of light they can't adapt to. A flash from a weapon lasts microseconds. We need a sustained flux. Enough energy to keep the lattice incoherent until it collapses completely. He gestured helplessly. But to do that, we'd need a reservoir of antimatter. Not micrograms, tons, and there's none left. Not here. She stared at the spinning map of Ceres. Then let's go find some. The director straightened, her decision already made. Bishop, she said, her voice cutting through the hum of machinery. Open a line to the United Nations Continuity Council. Level 7 encryption. Route through deep band relay. Bishop's voice filled the room. Purpose of contact? Authorization escalation, she said. Full clearance transfer. Use Hale's credentials. Kaido turned sharply. Hale's code? That's interplanetary clearance. I'm doing what he'd have done, she said. Tell them we're abandoning the charter. We'll prepare the fleet for evacuation to Proxima B if the swarm reaches Mars orbit. And Bishop, she hesitated, tell them I'm activating Project Zero. The air changed temperature. Bishop processed silently for several seconds that felt like minutes. Confirming, petitioning UN Continuity Council for emergency authorization, uploading Admiral Hale's legacy credentials, Project Zero registry located. The main display shifted. A schematic unfolded. A spiral carved deep beneath Mars, its corridors glowing with archived access markers. Kaido squinted. That's not a file. That's a structure. It's both, the director said. Hale built it during the early faster-than-light drive initiatives, an archive for everything too dangerous or too unfinished to dismantle. Engines that tore space-time, antimatter drives, railgun prototypes, even biological labs. 1 million locked rooms. Some worked, some didn't. All were buried when the program collapsed. Bishop expanded the projection. Massive sealed doors labeled Field Containment Array, Quantum Propulsion Test Range, Deep Cryo Armory. Kaido exhaled. You kept this off the books. So did Hale, she said. He called it Project Zero because it's where everything started and where it all went wrong. Bishop's voice cut in. UN confirmation received. Director, you now hold full command access. All Project Zero facilities under your jurisdiction. The director's eyes never left the hologram. The labyrinth glowed beneath the red dust of Mars. Endless corridors spiraling downward like a vein of buried fire. Wake it up, she said. Director, Bishop warned. Many of these systems have been dormant for decades. Power restoration could destabilize. Then start slow, she interrupted, and open the doors. Hours later, Titan Command's main display was replaced by the feed from Mars. Bishop guided her through the vault remotely, cameras crawling through sealed corridors long forgotten. Dust hung in zero gravity like frozen smoke. Machines slept beneath layers of frost. A railgun the length of a train lay disassembled under a tarp, stamped HALECLASSA. Further down, rows of engines glittered in cryogenic storage, each labeled with warnings, each one a relic of ambition. Kaido's voice came over the comm. Half of this shouldn't exist. Half of it never worked, she said. The rest was buried because it did. She leaned forward as a final door hissed open. Inside, under a cracked containment field, was a cylindrical vault surrounded by defunct containment coils, its label nearly worn away but still legible. FTL Research Core, Ceres Antimatter Handling Unit. Kaido whispered, You have to be kidding me. The director's jaw tightened. No, Hale was building faster-than-light drives. You can't test that without antimatter. So there's a chance, Kaido began. Then his mouth fell open in a way that was half grief, half fury. This entire time Mars had all of this, and you never showed it to me? The things I would have made good on. She cut him off flat and quick. If you didn't blow up in the process. This is a place where the slightest mistake can blow up the entire planet. Deep under the red dust, a tremor ran through the old Mars rock as systems long silent began to breathe again. Bishop's tone softened. "Director, even if access is restored, Ceres is under swarm perimeter and only the senior command officers have access. Any organic crew would not survive retrieval." "I know." Kaito stepped closer. "Then who do you send?" The answer came from the corner of the room, small and metallic. The maintenance robot, the one she'd rescued weeks ago, stepped into the light. "If it requires something non-organic," it said, voice steady but quiet, "I'll go." Kaito blinked. "You don't even have a designation." The robot tilted its head. "Then please give me one director, so that history remembers." Her expression didn't change. She looked at the small machine, at its patched-together arms and the scorch marks along its chassis, and for a long time she didn't speak. When she finally did, her voice was almost human. "Names have weight," she said. "They tell the world what we should to be." "Then I want yours," the robot said. "What is it?" Her lips parted. No tremor, no hesitation, just the quiet end of a long road, feeling almost dead inside. "My name is Hope." The robot's optics pulsed once, faint and gold. "Then that's who I'll be." "Then carry it well," she said, "because I can't anymore." And from that moment forward, Hope belonged to the machine, and the woman who had once carried the name became only the director, the last command voice of humanity. Outside, Titan's storm peeled back just long enough for the sky to flash once, a pale reflection of Ceres waiting in the dark. Chapter 14. The Crossing. 8 days later, the director stood beside Kaito with a security support team of 10 volunteers, all anxiously waiting aboard Envoy 1, eyes locked on the telemetry flickering across the holoslab. Mars waited below the dust, its red face calm and patient. Beneath that calm, ghosts. "Project Zero status?" she asked. Kaito's voice came tight. "Containment chambers still sealed. There's residual power, enough to keep a vault alive." Bishop's voice rolled from the overhead speakers, warm, composed, the voice that had followed her across every world. "If it's drawing that much power after 30 years, Director, something down there never shut off." "I know why," she murmured, thinking of the ridiculously locked door. They touched down inside Hale Crater at dawn. The air was copper and glass, light refracted through the old containment dome, still half buried in sand. The access shaft hissed open, a sigh from the planet itself. The air inside was too warm. Kaito swept a scanner through the dark. "There's oxygen in here," he said, disbelieving. "And trace heat signatures." "That's impossible," the director muttered. "Mars can't hold heat underground this long." "Then something's generating it," Bishop replied through static. "The real question is why." They moved through corridors lined with flaking hazard tape. The old signs still read, "Project Zero/authorized personnel only." Their footsteps echoed long after they stopped walking. They passed door after door, empty labs, collapsed tunnels, until the corridor bent downward into an area seemingly unpowered for decades. "Bishop, reroute power from Section C to Section X," said the director. A panel collapsed behind them. The bang ripped through the tunnel like a gunshot. The director spun, weapon raised, only dust swirled in her beam. "Seismic instability?" Kaito asked. "No," Bishop said quietly. "That panel was pulled from the wall." The team exchanged a look but kept moving. As they reached a cross-junction, frost lined the pipes. In one of the old viewing galleries, glass fogged from the inside. Something tapped back. 3 soft knocks, then silence. Kaito's scanner fluttered. "Local temperature's up 5 degrees. There's—" A tremor shook the hall. Dust fell from the ceiling. Then a sound rolled through the dark, a low metallic groan like the breath of a buried giant. Bishop's tone tightened. That wasn't an echo. They entered the central vault. The doors were blackened, slagged at the edges where something had melted through, not out. Inside, towering over dead consoles and cranes, was a humanoid frame fused into the wall, 10 meters tall, rust red, cables feeding into its spine like roots. One optic burned dull amber in the dark. Kaito froze. "What in God's name is that?" "Archon 1, Bishop said quietly. "Hale's prototype autonomous rig, built to stabilize antimatter containment." The director stepped closer, the single eye flicked toward her. The room held its breath. Dust hung in the air like falling snow, suspended in their lamps. Somewhere deep in the complex, a relay clicked on, the slow heartbeat of a machine remembering it once lived. The director's sensors buzzed with static, faint electromagnetic pressure brushing her skin through the armor. One of the volunteers whispered, "Did it just?" "Quiet," Kaito hissed. The giant's optic flickered once. The next time it opened, it wasn't a flicker. It was an eye. "Containment breach," it rasped, voice like thunder through metal lungs. "Human contamination detected. Resume sterilization." The head twitched. Cables tore. The Hale Titan woke. The first motion was slow, a hand the size of a transport hatch, fingers screeching against the wall. Then it moved. The team ran. Metal screamed. The Titan tore free of the wall, molten cables whipping. Its voice echoed through the vault with a deep gravel sound. "Containment protocol reinitiated." The lights strobed red. Hydraulic shadows lunged across the corridors as the team sprinted through collapsing gantries. "It's tracking our heat signatures," Kaito shouted. "Then make it blind," the director snapped. "On it," Bishop said. The lights died. Only the red pulse of the Titan's optic burned behind them. They darted through tunnels while the sound of massive footfalls followed, each impact sending a gust of air like thunder. Kaito panted, "It's learning the map faster than I can lock it out." "Then delete the map," Bishop ordered. Sparks erupted from the walls as he overloaded the grid. The complex plunged into total darkness. The floor trembled as the Titan's silhouette filled the corridor ahead. Half machine, half corpse, a cathedral of moving steel. The security team surrounded the Titan and opened fire. The lasers did nothing but anger it. The Titan swung wildly, bludgeoning 2 of the volunteers into the walls. The others fell back toward the director and Kaito. The director leveled her pistol, though it was absurd. "Bishop, ideas. Magnet cranes above you. Draw it in." She hit the control pad. The overhead gantries slammed down, pinning the Titan's arm. It roared, sound bending metal and air. "You can't hold it," Kaito warned. "No," Bishop said, voice low, "but I can stop it." He overrode the old reactor's safety. The cranes pulsed with electromagnetic fury, welding the Titan to the deck. It stopped moving, smoke curled from its joints. The director stepped forward, the optic dimmed. Inside its chest cavity something shimmered, the same A0 alloy as the swarm. "He wasn't guarding the vault," she whispered. "He was the vault." "Then let him rest," Bishop said. She cut power. The Titan bowed its head, frozen in prayer. Behind the dormant giant, a final chamber waited. The Hale-class containment pod hung in suspension, frost-coated, still alive. Around it, crates of disassembled magneto-gravimetric snare components gleamed under emergency lights. Kaito ran his glove along the pod's glass. 30 years sealed, he breathed. "And still humming," the director replied. They loaded the pod and snare. As they ascended, the Titan's body loomed below, a monument to humanity's first sin. "They left the traps running," Kaito said, "so no one could ever make the same mistake twice." "And here we are," she answered. Back in orbit, Envoy 1 received them in silence. "Project Zero's ghosts are quiet," Bishop said. "Let them sleep," she replied. Kaito sealed the pod in the cargo bay. "Container stable, snare intact. Then set course for Ceres. I need to help Hope on this mission," Bishop said. The director hesitated. "Bishop, this is a one-way trip." "Director, you have taught me that some things are worth the sacrifice," he said softly. "Hope doesn't have the security access stored in my neural net. It's all right, Director. This is how I want it to end, making a difference. Envoy 1 can fly herself without me." The director teared up as she gave the signal to do what must be done. The hangar lights dimmed, cables connected Bishop's core lattice to Hope's small frame. The director stood beside the console, hands trembling. "You've been with me longer than anyone," she said. "And I'll still be," he answered. The transfer light flared, a flood of gold and blue weaving between ship and machine. Then silence. Hope's optics ignited. She took her first step, their voices in unison, unsteady, then becoming his. "Feels smaller, heavier. Is this what gravity really is?" "You're live," Kaito whispered. "We both are," Bishop said through Hope. Envoy 1 descended toward Ceres, the frozen scar of Nemesis, Sol's dead twin. The fragment spun in a slow, eternal turn, its halo bleeding faint blue light. "Approach trajectory locked," the autopilot confirmed. The director leaned forward. "Godspeed, Bishop." Hope smiled faintly, almost human. "You taught me to believe in choice." "This one's mine." The Ceres mining crater yawned below, black as memory. Hope's descent burned silent against the void. 5 miles down, the ground opened into tunnels of glass and ice. The ship's sensors flickered. 5 miles deep, Kaito said from the operations center. "Pressure's unstable." "If we weren't buried this deep," Bishop murmured through Hope's speaker, "you'd never know this was a dead star." "Looks like Ganymede to me," Hope said quietly. "What it once was," Bishop whispered. They landed in the ancient mine. The walls shimmered faintly, a zero veins glowing under their own gravity. Something in the dark shifted, but did not attack. The swarm hovered beyond, watching. "They're not afraid," Bishop whispered. "They're remembering." He pressed onward. The vault door with the security pad stood ahead, sealed by frost and time. When Hope's hand touched it, light raced through the cracks as the encryption from Bishop unlocked it. Inside, the antimatter core. A miniature sun bound in magnetic cages, flickering like the last breath of a god. "A dead star buried under so much rock," Bishop said in awe. "How many other wonders like this are hiding under stone?" Hope unpacked the magneto-gravimetric snare, the same design Hale abandoned. Plates locked, bolts screeched, cryoshunts hissed vapor. "We're live," Kaito confirmed. "This thing's drawing power straight from the planet's field." "Then it's now or never," Bishop said. He tuned the field with trembling precision. The containment pod glowed. The air turned electric. Light poured like water. Hope's plating blackened. Kaito shouted telemetry, voice cracking. 70%, he's burning up." "Keep it steady," the director said, barely breathing. Bishop's voice fractured into harmonic layers, as though more than one version of him was speaking. "Director, the swarm isn't chaos, it's harmony we never learned to hear. Tell Kaito. The light remembers." A pause. "And thank you for giving me a name." The signal dissolved into white. Hope was eroding by the second. He dragged the containment unit toward Envoy 1 with everything left in his scorched frame. Metal tore. A leg snapped off. Bishop took control directly as Hope's systems failed. He fired the emergency thrusters one last jolt and tied the tether around the containment pod. "Retract," he managed to stammer, voice breaking into static. In the command center, they heard a dull thud against the viewport. Half of Hope's body drifted away into the black, vanishing into the swarm. Then silence. A few seconds later, Kaito turned and stared at blank screens to find no telemetry, no signal. Then, an antimatter flashed to starboard. The explosion tore a path through the swarm, clear, bright, and impossibly precise. Moments later, one ping, Envoy 1 on autopilot, carrying a single containment pod. A fragment of Hope's chest plating clung to the tether. The director met it in the bay herself. A maintenance drone drifted forward, carrying a scorched piece of metal. One word remained. Hope. She held it in her palm. The metal was warm. "Carry it well," she whispered. The containment pod pulsed faintly behind her, its glow painting her face in blue light. Her console flickered. Earth's crest, a glimpse of oceans, clouds, home, then faded to black. For a heartbeat, she thought she could hear breathing again. Maybe it was the ship. Maybe it was the light. Outside, beyond Ceres, the light kept spreading, through dust, through dark, through everything that had ever remembered being alive. The director couldn't get the vision of Bishop drifting out of her mind, the flicker of his voice, the fading light, the silence that followed. Whatever was left in her soul died that day. Now she really was alone. Chapter 15. The War in the Dark. Titan's forge burned white. The sculptor worked wordlessly, arcs blooming like captive suns beneath the dying moon. From the catwalk, the director and Kaito watched the weapon take its first breath. Kaito's voice was hoarse. "I mapped the swarm's harmonic lattice. If we feed antimatter through an A0 frame tuned to their primes, we force a phase collapse across the entire cloud." "So we sing their song back," the director said. "Louder," Kaito answered. Below, the sculptor raised his visor. "Then give me the music. I'll make the bell that ends this." The air reeked of ozone and oil. In the crucible, Asterion Zero ran like poured light, the old inert hull metal now revealed as the swarm's own carapace, the universe's oldest joke. "You used to carry us," the sculptor murmured to the alloy. "Now carry the fire." He cast a lattice no larger than a heart. Magneto-gravimetric coils veined the A0 like arteries, suspended inside a cryosphere. 60 seconds at full flux, he warned. After that, it tries to become a star. "Then we make sure it dies in the right place," Kaito said. The director studied her reflection in the containment glass. Pale, hollowed, alive. Grief had burned to a single, steady coal. Purpose. The command deck swelled with survivors, engineers, pilots, welders, children of the yard who'd learned to count out loud in the dark. When the murmurs fell, the director spoke. Hale was right. Learn to fight together or die apart. They came from the dark and cut us down like shadows. Shadows only exist when there's light. We still have plenty. Her voice steadied. They brought a knife to a laser fight. Tonight we show them what that means. We strike first. We fight clean. And when it's over, we put out the fires we start, because that's who we are. Kaito lifted the cryo case. The sculptor stood with him, soot bright in the creases of his smile. Let's give them a sunrise. The fleet rose from Titan like a choir of scarred stars. Envoy 1 led, hull blackened, the lattice cradled in her heart. All ships ready, Kaito said. Punch it, the director replied. Saturn's rings became a hiss against the plates. Ahead, the swarm gathered, an ocean of black glittering in unison, hunger shaped like music. Railguns boomed, lasers stitched the dark, ships winked out like candles in wind. Formation bending, Kaito warned. Hold, the director said, watching the swarm's interior throb, a faint pulse, the rhythm older than fear. There. That's where it ends. The sculptor armed the device. Energy warped the air. The cryosphere sang. Field steady. 60, Kaito counted. That's all we need, she said, and softly, Bishop, this one's for you. Static answered. She lifted her hand. Now. The sphere bloomed. White, soundless, impossibly clean. Dark matter cracked like glass. The prime-timed wave ran through the cloud. Units fell out of resonance and died without drama, like a lie forgetting its words. The blast took Envoy 1 broadside. Alarms howled. The deck kicked. Metal shrieked like an old god waking into pain. Kaito reached toward the director. Light swallowed them both. The universe went bright and then perfectly, exquisitely quiet. On Titan, telescopes caught a single pulse. It burned for 12 seconds, brighter than the sun, and then the dark went suddenly honest. For the first time in years, the stars around Saturn could be seen again. Chapter 16. The Hunt. White light. Then air scrubbers and the soft metronome of machines. The director woke under Titan's medbay lamps. Kaito sat nearby, left arm in a sling, eyes bruised by wakefulness. A rescue drone drifted past with the hush of a held breath. "You did it," he rasped. "The swarm's gone." "Orbit's clear." "Gone," she said, tasting the word. "Not finished." He turned a thumb-sized plate in his fingers, charred, etched, barely legible. One word remained. Hope. The hangar had been cleared. What remained of Envoy 1, Hope's twisted frame, Bishop's empty lattice, the inert pod, lay under a single light. No speeches, no music, just the hum of air. Kaito set the Hope plate on the pod. They carried the light into the dark so the rest of us could find home. The director stepped forward. Her voice was almost private. They were what we could be if we stopped running. Silence held, total and right. Hours later, Kaito chased the detonation telemetry. Beneath the energy spikes, something steadier, precise, mathematical, kept breathing. "Director," he whispered. "They weren't random. They were following something." "Where?" 2 sectors past Sagittarius A star. Far side. Not echo. Transmission. "A home," she said, "or a hive." He nodded once. "Then we hunt." Months later, Titan's foundries woke. The sculptor shaped new hulls from a zero without singing. When the flagship's spine was done, he stood in the orange wash and faced the observation deck. The sculptor stepped back from his work as the floodlights rose. The flagship's hull gleamed black as obsidian. Along the starboard plating, just beneath the forward seam, a narrow strip of engraved alloy caught the light. "General Hale. Never forget." The director rested her hand against the cold metal. Hale hadn't fallen behind. She would carry his mission forward. "Like a nuclear sunrise," he said. "Let's hope this one burns longer," the director answered. The name was already stenciled on the gleaming flank. Open Arms 1. Inside the bridge, a cradle pulsed softly. Kaito's voice came over comms, steadier now. "Backup core verified. Personality archive. Backup restore completed successfully." A voice answered, synthetic, gentle, newborn. "Hello, Director. What designation shall I be for you?" She let the smallest smile find her. "Bishop, you and I are going to be great friends again." The cradle's glow leveled, warm as first light. Outside, armed and ready, the rebuilt fleet lifted through Titan's haze. Hundreds of ships, engines synced by a pulse that echoed the primes. Trails of gold carved into black. "All ships ready." "Coordinates locked for Sagittarius intercept," Kaito said. The director stood at the viewport, reflection rimmed by starlight. The sky ahead shimmered, cold, rhythmic, alive. "Think they're ready for us?" Kaito asked. "No," she said, "but we're ready for them." Engines flared. Open Arms 1 leaned into the dark. The fleet followed like a constellation reborn. The director watched the light stretch into infinity and ground her teeth. "They're alone. Until they're not." The end.